Welcome to the Timely Topics Show, where we're bringing you all the buzz and banter of today's business conversations. Straight from our studios in downtown Hartford, with your hosts, Roy McGloin and Jennifer Matthew. Welcome to our first episode of Timely Topics. I'm your host, Roy McGloin, and I'm excited to be joined by my co-host, the woman most likely to wear buttons on her jacket for the first episode, Jen Matthew.
Hey.
Our theme for this episode is rebranding, and later on we'll be diving into the topic of personal branding or rebranding. And as always, or I guess for the very first time, we'll be rounding things off with our good idea or bad idea segment featuring our producer, Alex, with the best hair and his mystery topic. Let's get started. Welcome to the show, everybody. So we're recording this the week after the Super Bowl, and the question on everybody in the office's mind, Jen, is, did you watch the game?
Do you think I watched the game?
I really hope you did, because I thought I made a compelling argument that really every American needs to sit down and watch the Super Bowl so that they know what's going on the next day.
Yeah, I watched it. I'm not going to lie, though. I definitely went back and forth between the regular televised version and the one on Nickelodeon because that whole SpongeBob theme really fired me up.
So Nickelodeon showed the actual football game, and SpongeBob was a commentator, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, there was a lot of things happening.
There
it was
go.
Fantastic. It really added a little spin to my evening.
I'm interested right now, like for any of our viewers or listeners for the show, if they watch the Nickelodeon version, let us know, because we need to know our audience demographic is to kick this show off. And so Jen's watching the Nickelodeon version of the Super Bowl. I guess that gives you some inclination as to where things are headed. So I did watch the game, and from a football perspective, it was a great game. I thought it was really entertaining. Personal opinion, I thought the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs deserved the MVP, not Pat Mahomes. That's an opinion. You can go ahead and tell us a little about that. But of course, everybody also watches the Super Bowl for the commercials. And did you check out any commercials? Did you watch them the next day? Did you have a favorite?
Yeah, I don't know that I had a favorite commercial. I definitely watched them, but I didn't have a favorite. What about you?
I certainly had a favorite. I thought that the Dunkin' commercial with all the Boston boys coming together, thought it was funny. It was quirky. It was well done. And then actually one of the things that I really like from a marketing advertising perspective is I've actually seen some content come out in conjunction with the commercial as if it was like some offshoots or some stuff that didn't make the commercial. And I thought that that was actually really good. So I love when they like continue the story. By the way, just learned this the other day. So this gives you a sense of where I'm coming from. So I sat down and I watched the final episode of Ted Lasso. News alert, right? That came out a couple of years ago. But when I have something that I really like, I like to really savor it. And so Megan and I were talking about like the origins of Ted Lasso, and she told me the story that it was actually a byproduct of a commercial that NBC had filmed, I think in 2013, when they were putting the EPL, the English Premier League soccer games on Saturday morning, that they got the Ted Lasso character, they filmed a commercial on it, and then that actually was the origins of Ted Lasso. Really cool story. Did you know that?
I had no idea, but I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan, and I understand what you're saying because I did not want that show to end, and it's just interesting that you just waited too long, though. I needed closure. Like, I needed to watch that final episode.
It was great. We probably shouldn't go back in time for folks that are like, yeah, Roy, that was, you could have done the show 3 years ago and done that. Let's talk a little bit more. When we were leading up to the Super Bowl conversation, of course, around the office place, we're talking, are you going to watch the game? Are you going to a Super Bowl party? Jen, you exclaimed that you really didn't want to watch it, and you had a very particular reason for not wanting to consume the Super Bowl this year.
Well, one, being a little salty that my favorite team wasn't playing is a piece of that. I'm not a...
Jen's a Cowboys fan, so it's been a while.
It sure has been a while. But, I just don't... There's some levels of hype and over-excitement around things that I just don't buy into or subscribe to.
Was it a T Swift thing?
I don't have anything against Taylor Swift. I need to be clear. We have some friends in the room that would not allow me out of here safely.
Thank
so
you.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move things along here. Today's theme is rebranding. It is still relatively the beginning of the year. We're entering that middle phase of February. By the time you guys listen or watch this, it'll be relatively the end of February. It's probably inappropriate to keep continuing to wish people a happy new year, but sometimes I feel compelled because I haven't seen them since the beginning of the new year. So you want to be like, hey, I hope you have a great year, even though you're 2 months in. Nevertheless, when it comes to rebranding and New Year's and resolutions, Jen, we talked a little bit about this, but have you rebranded for the new year? Have you ever rebranded in your life? Is this something you've ever engaged or thought about in particular?
I think I have over the course of my adult life as I've gained new professional experiences. I've certainly been intentional about that process, and I know we'll chat a little bit more about that later, but I really think that there's an opportunity at the beginning of a new season to really think about how you're showing up to the world, whether that's an entirely new brand or it's just you're being more intentional with the way you put yourself out into the world.
Okay. And as many of our timely topic listeners, our viewers from the last year and a half or so might recognize, we've rebranded the entire show. So now we are coming to you in a video podcast format, and we're going to be trying to spice things up a little bit. We'll be having interviews. We'll be having segments. We will be inviting all of you to send in your correspondence, sending us your thoughts, your ideas, your notes, your contradictions, if you will. And so it got me thinking a little bit, Jen, about, this journey to get this place. And there's only one first for everything, right? So this is our first episode. And so for anybody that's made it this far in, thank you so much. There's been a tremendous amount of work and effort, but I just wanted to take a second, and Jen doesn't know we're going to do this, but I want to take a second to acknowledge not only Jen's support of this program, but our entire team. For the longest time, I think it's been an aspiration to want to put some content together that was fun, that was engaging. We're going to really dig into our greater Hartford community. We're going to invite some guests on, and we want to make this a show that really feels like it's for the people here in our greater Hartford area. And hopefully it'll spread its way around the country and maybe around the world. But there's so many people that we have to thank just to get to this point. And so for me to want to produce this show from the top, to say thank you to Jen for having the insights and creating the space for us to do this. Our amazing team, our producer Alex and our producer Emily, Michaela, for all the work that you're doing to engage everybody across the team, to Aaron, to Jude, thank you so much. And so it's just been an amazing opportunity. And I also just want to, have one more moment to say, if you're watching, if you're listening, if you're going to consume the show regularly, we invite you to get involved. We would love to see some advertisers on the show as we go forward, some donations, something to support. We have some amazing interns here that are getting some great hands-on experiences. We'd love to be able to pay them to make sure that their work is rewarded. So just something to think about. If you like timely topics, let us know. Reach out plenty of ways. We're going to show you how to do correspondence. But speaking of, Alex, it's our very first show. So let's dive into the correspondence segment.
All right, Rory. Since this is our first official episode, we received several well wishes from our friends and supporters. Nicholas M. said, and I quote, "You guys are going to crush it," end quote. So, Rory, Jen, feeling any pressure to succeed?
Well, first of all, thanks for chiming in, Nick. We appreciate your support. In regards to pressure, I've always said, and the fact that you put the question to us, pressure is a privilege. And so if you don't think that this is an opportunity, then I think it's kind of wasted. So yeah, certainly feeling some pressure to make sure that we put out something that represents ourselves, our team, the entire organization in a way that we want it to. What about you, Jen?
I'm just more excited about finally getting this thing going. I think we felt a little bit of pressure at the beginning to figure out how it was all going to come together. Now that we're actually sitting in this room surrounded by really great talent with great topics to talk about, so much energy behind what we're building, I just feel excited to put this out into the world.
Okay. All right. What else you got, Alex?
Ryan Gresh said, quote, "When can I come on the show? Seriously, so pumped for you guys. It's a great opportunity to engage with your community. Excited to watch the first episode," end quote. So, Rory, Jen, what if someone wants to be in the show? What should they do? What are you looking for?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Ryan, for the shout out. I know you've been a great follower and friend of CCI, and as we've been planning this podcast and the Collaboratory really in general. So thank you so much for your support. Rory, what do you think? How can people get involved?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And for all of our friends and CCI alumni out there, we'd love to hear from you. Check in. We'd love to have you on the show at some point. So really, what are we looking for? We want to bring an opportunity for folks to share great stories. We know that we're competing in a really deep marketplace of podcasts, and the interview show has been done a lot. Joe Rogan's probably got us covered there. I think what we want to do is we want to be able to feature folks and stories that maybe you haven't heard or that you're really interested in. And so if you've got ideas, and maybe it's you, or maybe it's a new business, maybe there's an entrepreneur, maybe there's a leader in your community, someone that's doing something great, let us know. We want to be able to feature, we want to be able to share those stories out with our audience. So this is going to be an opportunity for greater correspondence. There's going to be opportunities, send us emails, comment on the LinkedIn, comment on our Instagram, let us know that you're watching, listening, what you see. And when the time is right, we'll reach out and we'll try to get you on the show.
And I also want to just do a shout out for what this space is that we're building, the Collaboratory. We're building this space to support entrepreneurs and basically their communication skills and personal branding. And for us to be able to leverage these entrepreneurs in this space, for them not only to see what we're doing so they can go then and do that in their specific industry, in their through their thought leadership, but even giving them a platform to practice with us, I think is great as well.
Yeah, all going well. As we continue to evolve, we will hopefully create more spaces for our entrepreneurs coming through CCI as well as in our community to come in and to experience this. It was in fact Ryan who sent in the correspondence for this episode, who talked about how valuable this would have been for the line of work that he was doing. And so hopefully we'll be able to make sure that future CCI folks have a chance to do that. By the way, if you want to get in touch with us, as we've been talking about, you can send us an email at collaboratory@uconn.edu. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Send in a message, a DM, leave a comment, and we'll get in touch. And we really appreciate any correspondence that we receive going forward.
Guess what just happened?
No way, you're kidding me.
Hey, did you hear about...
Are you sure about that? I can't believe they... Really?
It's time for Timely Topics.
Our timely topic for this episode is personal branding, a concept that has become increasingly popular in the seemingly infinite world of social media. The concept seems to carry many interpretations and even more applications, so we thought we'd take a closer look at what personal branding is and how it applies to all of us. We'll discuss our opinions on the best ways to build your brand or maybe even rebrand it. Let's dive in.
So as we discussed at the beginning of the show, the opportunity of personal branding and the start of a new year. So I often think about the start of many new things, or the way that we put the new version of ourselves out into the world, even a fresh new haircut. It's the way that we want to be portrayed by others. So what if we didn't have to wait for the fresh start of something to be intentional about the brand and the value that we're putting out into the world to others?
So you're just saying we can just rebrand ourselves at any point?
Yeah. Do we have to wait for January 1 to have a new start?
And you're saying that whether it's getting a haircut or finding that perfect new outfit, new pair of shoes, that we might want to start considering that as part of our brand or rebranding?
Potentially.
Okay, I got to give a shout out right now because you mentioned haircuts, and we're across the street from Constitution Barbershop. And for me, it's a rebrand every time I go in, and Madison does an awesome job, I think, on my hair, right? And I just love her so much for it. And it is part of that rebrand because you walk out feeling so fresh. Yep. So we're just going to have to figure out as we go through this process, what are we going to quantify or what are we going to operationalize as being part of the rebrand? But let's take a giant step back. And let's ask the question that maybe is on everybody's mind to some degree is, what is personal branding? The concepts have been chucked around a lot lately. I think that social media and influencers have obviously played a big role in that, but I believe that we've always had personal brands. It just feels like now, because we can see ourselves and because maybe the impact of ourselves and others is tangible with likes, comments, shares, engagements, it maybe feels a little bit more important. But what does personal branding mean to you, Jen?
I think it's the strategic piece of what visual representation we have about ourselves, and that can be as how we dress, the types of clothing that we wear, whether it's to the office or out with friends. But I also think it goes a little bit deeper than that, and it ties into who we are, what we value, what we want to achieve in our lives, the way in which we connect, whether it's with our industry or maybe even an aspirational industry that we want to get involved in the future. But I really think the strategy piece of it is what makes this a little bit different than just throwing clothes on and walking out into the world one day.
You told me back in January that your resolution for the year was to be intentional, and that really resonated with me because I think when it comes to personal branding, it's about identifying what it is that you want others to see in you, and quite literally what they see, but also very much how they feel about your presence when you leave the room, right? What have you left behind? And I think if it's intentional, then you have a personal brand. For many of us, maybe we've been left wondering, do I need to do this? Is it worth it? I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of folks over the years and talk about this topic in training and development workshops. One of the first things that we want to do is we want to convince people that it's actually worth spending the time to first and foremost come up with a strategy or a plan, to be intentional, because the rest of it's just tactics and strategies to go and to carry that mission out. And one of the best parts is that we are our own entities, so we can identify what benefit we'll get out of it, and hopefully that serves as the motivation to go and do it. Jen, as somebody who I know has thought about your personal brand and you care deeply about all of the aesthetics that go into it, what have you found to be some of the biggest benefits for you as you've been intentional about the personal brand? What are the benefits that you've seen? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about what the benefits we've seen in others as they've gone through the process.
Yeah, I think a piece of that is creating the connection between myself and where I work and what I do. I think that seamlessness, that transition of personal to professional isn't as big of a category anymore to me. It isn't such a big gap between the two. That alignment has felt much better over probably the last 10 years of my professional career. As I work with other members of our team and startups and entrepreneurs that I'm mentoring, I can see the significant value in them as individuals being like that representative of their brand, not just their personal brand, but the brand that they're bringing into the world.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things that I've seen in others that we've worked with to help with their personal branding, especially when it comes to those entrepreneurs, is getting them to align directly with their business, with their vision, with their values and their mission, that they are one and the same, especially for founders. If you're a founder, right, you want to live, eat, breathe, sleep those values, and that purpose of your business in many regards, in my opinion, should be very closely aligned to what your personal purpose is. And the reason, because I think it provides tremendous benefit to your overall credibility and trust, right? So when you think of a certain topic or a concept or a product, I think you want your audiences to immediately go, that's Jen, that's Rory, that's Alex. Those are the people in my life. I know exactly what they do. I know what they stand for. And now we are cutting down the gaps between your business purpose and your personal purpose. And for me, like having your brand be aligned for entrepreneurs in particular, but really for maybe all of us, if you're in a job or profession or career that you relatively like, maybe the step to loving it is trying to narrow that gap and working on an alignment between your professional identity and that personal identity.
And it's so funny because when we do these workshops, so we're really strategic and intentional here at the center, thinking through how we can do some of this work, thought leadership work, personal branding work. And a question that we get oftentimes is this, are you asking me this question as a person, or am I answering it as me and my role in my job? And it's so funny to take a step back and remember that time in our lives when we thought that way, that those two things were distinctly different.
Yeah, and go one step further. One of the things that we've seen in the research on this, right? So the literature suggests is that folks that have spent time investing intentionally in developing their personal brand, and maybe it's alignment with their professional career, but just putting the effort in, some of the things that are happening are this: you're getting increased visibility, which for those of you that are inclined to care, the research is actually suggesting it's leading to higher earning potentials, because what's happening is, and I always say this, it's like you're starting to get the right phone calls, right? You're attracting the right clients, you're getting the right emails. So if your personal brand is somewhat undefined, if people can't really narrow the scope of what it is down, you might be getting business, or you might be getting offers, or you might be getting projects at work. Are they the projects you want? Are they the projects that you're good at, right? Are they the things that bring you joy? Because we'd always argue, right? If you show up to work and you're happy about the work you're doing, it's probably going to be good work. But make it easy for folks in your life to assign you the right projects, to call you for the right opportunities. And as a byproduct of that, you'll do really good work. And hopefully that'll lead to career growth, to personal growth, and just going home contented with the contributions that you've made.
Yeah. And sometimes I think there's opportunity when you have a mentor, a colleague, somebody that you look up to, if they're offering you something that maybe you don't see in yourself, and you haven't gone down this journey of personal branding, personal development, what a great opportunity is it to get feedback from those people, to dive in a little bit more about what they see in you that you maybe don't see yet in yourself.
Okay, so let's use that as a bit of a transition for folks that are listening or watching who might be inspired right now and saying, all right, I'm going to do it. It's the year. Maybe some of our folks already have. So if you've already have, send us your tips. What worked for you? But I think, Jen, what you just offered there is a great first step, right? So how do you go about this process? How do you make it intentional? And I think one of the ways you want to do it is you need to start to define that brand identity. And if that seems overwhelming or even remotely cliche to you, then let's just make it simple, right? Take some trusted friends, some advisors, some mentors that you've got in your life, and just ask them, like, hey, when you think of me, what are some of the words that come to mind? Use those immediate responses and those characteristics to go, okay, if they're seeing these traits and characteristics, the next question becomes, what is it about you that allows you to see that in me, right? Are you reliable? Are you trustworthy? Are you kind? Are you thoughtful? Are you empathetic? Are you dynamic? Whatever those words that you get are, then the next question becomes, can you give me a specific example of a time that you did that? And now you have an opportunity to corroborate the characteristic with a piece of evidence that demonstrates that. And you're well on your way to hopefully starting to write those concepts down and put them in front of you in a place that you can begin to use and to build off of them. Once you've got that, what would you say you would do next, Jen?
I would dive a little bit more into creating some consistency in the way in which I'm packaging that. So One way that I've done that is taken the description that I say about myself when I'm giving presentations for my business, and the same thing I say about myself when I'm speaking about myself for my role at CCEI. That's the same message. That's the same one sentence thing that I say. I'm really passionate about supporting entrepreneurs and giving them the courage, the strength, the opportunity to create a life that they dreamed of, or something along those lines, right? And I use that very similar thing every time I'm speaking. So creating these very clear packaged elements.
What I kind of hear you saying is sit down and write your purpose story in some regards, maybe. So one of my favorite books, and anybody that spent some time with me, Built to Last, Jim Collins, the entire series of Jim Collins books. But if we've identified our values and we know those 3 or 4 core values that make up who we are, we then talk from an organizational standpoint, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, from an individual standpoint, what's your purpose? And so if you can identify a singular purpose statement, such as my purpose is to help others communicate more effectively, period, I can really do that in just about every element or aspect of my life, whether I'm coaching my daughter's basketball team on a Saturday morning, right? We're coming in to work with some startups, right? We're going out into the community to build some programs. There's an opportunity for me to try to live my purpose. And so by doing that, I think that's going to help with that alignment. So first, values. Second, thinking about a purpose statement. And then we're also in the middle of our Build Hartford course. And one of the books that we assigned was Stories That Stick by Kendra Hall. And there's 4 types of stories, but one of the ones that I wanted to highlight today is that founder story. And it might be kind of exciting for some of our listeners or viewers who are not identifying as entrepreneurs to potentially think of themselves as an entrepreneur and like they are their own entity. So what's your founder story, right? And when you think about where you are listening to this right now, what is it that you're doing and how did you get there? That's kind of part of that founder story. And I think if you can put the work in to develop that founder story, and you can of course check the book out and maybe read a little bit more if this is exciting to you, but the founder story of like who you are and how you got to the place you are.
Yeah, and I think even just practicing that a little bit so that it feels authentic when you talk about it. There's some words, some lingo, some jargon, right? You go into ChatGPT, you have them, come up with a great couple of one-liners. Those words aren't going to feel real to you, and probably not the words you would necessarily use to connect with yourself. So that's a great starting point if you have no idea how to craft a statement like this or a story. But I would say going through that, rehearsing, and just seeing what feels natural when you go out and try it.
I love that. I think you got to work on your own thesaurus.
Yeah.
I think that vernacular matters. The research exists out there that talks about identity being a byproduct of the stories that you tell, and specifically the vernacular that you use. I'm big on this. So if you want somebody to identify your value as being communication, then you're probably going to want to use terms around communication quite a bit in your day-to-day activity. So whatever it is that you want people to think of you when you walk out of the room, right, and you've left the space that you were in, and you want to leave people behind with a particular value or a purpose or a skill set, try to bring that vernacular into your space. Be intentional and strategic about the vernacular that you're using. So quite literally, right, like have those words written down in front of you, have them in spaces where you are reminded to bring them into conversations as often as you can.
Yeah, and just tying in those personal values, those core words that you use, I think is key, and keeping that consistent.
So we've thought a little about our values. We've given a tip of suggesting just like ask some folks around you to offer some thoughts and ideas. We've talked about this value of having a purpose statement, singular statement that will align and narrow the gap between personal and professional, between your brand, between your business, your startup, and who you are as a founder or as an employee of that organization. Any final tips that we might be able to share for folks that are maybe still reluctant, worried, nervous, scared? This can be an overwhelming process, by the way. Like I've sat down with folks and said, let's go and do this, right? And they have that like apprehension. Yeah. And actually one of the things that's worth addressing, because some of our listeners or viewers might be thinking about this, they might have that apprehension that's like, I don't know if anybody cares, right? Or like, is anybody interested? Does it matter? And so, Jen and I are probably here to remind you like, yeah, 100%, right? Because there's all these various benefits from it. So Jen, what are your tips when you encounter somebody that may be going, I'm not quite sure yet, or I've been hesitant, or I've wanted to, but I haven't pulled the trigger on it?
Yeah, well, can I just say first, take a step back, like, does it matter? That piece of it is critical. We're in a world in which we can own our own content, create our own space. Why would we allow others around us or other platforms to share our story? Like you type in Google, and Google's been around for a long enough time, you could type in your name and find a story about yourself. We have platforms where we can create our own content. We can put our own stuff into the world. So if you have access to own that, why not really be thoughtful and intentional about doing that? But I would say you don't have to do everything at once. A lot of times we look at other people's successes, where they are. I would say like they're at chapter 1, they're at chapter 10, we're at chapter 1. we don't have to get to chapter 10 in a day. So it's thinking through, how do I do this in bite-sized pieces and realize we don't have to take over the world in a day.
Yeah, I was just going to say for me, like, not only not the pressure to do it, but like, don't follow the trends out there. Right. And so like, don't find yourself being like, well, TikTok's out now, so now I got to create a TikTok account. I got to follow that trend. I mean, if you're up for the challenge, like fire away. But I think for me, think about where you're at your best, right? Like, what are your communication styles or patterns? Where do you think that your brand is strongest? And so maybe it's in your written word. So maybe it's jumping on your LinkedIn or your Facebooks or your social medias, right? And just writing that caption, telling a great story from the day. Maybe you're just a photographer. Maybe you're a visual person. So it's just snapping that photo, and you don't even need a caption because it's just sharing, like, I took a photo of a sunset and I shared it with the world. I value like the beauty of nature. Find a space that you can contribute just little nuggets and like pieces of who you are, and be comfortable that somebody else out there, number one, shares those same values, right? They share that same learning style or communication pattern. And so they're going to look at it. They're going to appreciate it. And even if there's no like, comment, share, you've influenced your brand. And I think that's what's most important.
Yeah. And I would also say that there's opportunity to find aspirational people, whether it's in your industry or someone that you really value the way that they put themselves out into the world. Start following them on the platforms and the channels that you want to put yourself out on. I love Sarah Blakely and what she puts out on LinkedIn specifically. So I think that type of content is something that you can find and say, I can actually do something not exactly the same way, but I can think about a way to put myself out there that this particular person has done.
Absolutely. That's our topic for today, folks. It's been a great conversation around rebranding, in particular around personal branding. For those of you out there that are working on your personal brands, maybe you've had a success story, you got some tips to share, send them in Collaboratory@uconn.edu, or send us a message on any of our social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. In this episode, Jen will be interviewing Connecticut Chief Marketing Officer Anthony Anthony. He was the man responsible for rebranding Connecticut's tagline from Still Revolutionary to Make It Here. Let's have a listen.
Today, we have with us Anthony Anthony, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for the state of Connecticut. Welcome to the Collaboratory at CCEI.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So in this episode, we are talking about personal branding. We're talking about rebranding. And we thought, who better to bring in than the Chief Marketing Officer for the state of Connecticut, who just went through a whole new rebrand for the state. So I'm really excited to get into that, ask you a few questions about that. But first and foremost, the question I think everyone is asking is Anthony part of your personal brand? Tony Squared? What are you going with here?
It's totally become part of it. Tony 2 times I've heard, A squared, double on my Instagram handle is double Anthstagram. So there's a lot of different ways to skin that. But no, I've actually found, as in my professional career, that it's been a benefit. It's been a blessing. As a kid, I thought it was a curse. My very first mentor in my first job out of college was a very small marketing agency in New York City. And it was the CEO, a very creative guy, kind of like a creative mad scientist. And he wore yellow tinted glasses, had like this Jerry curl mullet, and wore those monk suits, the ones that like don't really have a collar. And so he goes, Anthony, let me tell you something. People will remember you for your name. Do you think I look like a fool because I want to? No, it's because people remember me because of it. So you don't have to look like this. So, okay, thank you.
Oh, that's great advice.
It was amazing advice, and people remember it, and it's been, again, a blessing, not a curse.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what a CMO does for the state of Connecticut. So what were you positioned to do, and then what are some of the goals that you have for your role?
So it's an interesting role. It's the first time the state has had this. Prior to joining the team at DECD, I was the communications director and special advisor to Governor Lamont. And then previous to that, it was in the private sector, working for brand communications agencies as a creative director and strategist. So it's a little bit of a different arc to get into public service. But in coming over, I was tasked with really bolting a supercharger on the story of Connecticut, telling a new story, a different story, and helping us achieve our overarching objectives as a state under the governor's leadership, which is to grow our population, grow the number of non-propensity businesses out there. So anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's a business that hires people, not just a single person entrepreneur, and to change perceptions of the state. So with those three things, I believe if we not only rebrand the state, but tell a better story, a more authentic story, and one that lots of people can feel a part of, whether they live here, work here, or out of state, we can better achieve those goals. So that's really why I was brought in and overseeing both state marketing and branding and the Office of Tourism.
Oh, that's great. And so the Office of Tourism is a piece of that as well then. So are there specific strategies that you're implementing that are a little bit different when you're focusing on those coming into the state to visit, experience versus those maybe you want to attract to live here, grow up their businesses here?
Yeah, over the past few years prior to coming in, they were completely separate. The Office of Marketing and Branding and then the Office of Tourism really didn't, they weren't working closely together. And so when I came in, I said, these things all have to be kind of singing the same message and doing the same thing. So following our rebrand, which launched last October, the governor said, well, you know what? We need all state agencies to be aligned with this. So everybody's adopting the new branding. And then also we recognize that based upon the needs of the market, businesses, potential residents, there's a real reason for us to be looking at these two, what used to be silos of marketing, looking at them as one. So at the end of the day, we market the state as a great place to live, work, and play. So holistically, they kind of say the same thing, but it's a little bit different. The live and work piece and the play piece can be a little bit more residential and business focused. While tourism, that visitation piece is really more traditional tourism. Yeah. But with a different message. I mean, different vibe, if you will. Really energetic, trying to flip the perceptions of Connecticut on its head.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about Make It Here.
So Make It Here is the state's marketing campaign. And that is the theme for the campaign. I've had a lot of people come to me and say, hey, is that the state's new tagline? It's the new Still Revolutionary. And I said, no, we're not. We're not doing taglines for the state. We could end up changing the campaign in a few years to fit our needs, but this is the campaign, and it's really about the identity of who Connecticut is. And we looked at, to get to this point, to figure out that identity, we looked at who we were, who we are, and who we need to be. And we realized it's all cohesive. It's not different. And who that is we're a state of creators, makers, innovators, and entrepreneurs who are a powerful force for good in this country. And if you look at our history, from everything from the Polaroid camera and the wiffle ball and helicopters to the most complicated machines in the world that we make, and some of the high-end chips and quantum computing technologies that we're going to be developing here, it tells the world who we are going to be. And so it's aspirational and real and authentic, and I think it makes for a compelling reason that people want to be here. Mm-hmm. So, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, and I can wax poetic. So I think it's important, though, that whether you're a homemaker, a teacher, a manufacturer, an artist, a restaurateur, and a chef, everybody should know that this is a place where that spirit, that mentality of creativity and creation, you're contributing to making something great.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And as soon as I saw the campaign come out, so there's a little bit of teaser that you were doing leading up to it, which I thought was great. And as soon as it came out, I personally jumped on that right away, because what we do at the center is supporting entrepreneurs going out and making something, right? Mm-hmm. Creating something that didn't exist before. And that's the platform we stand on. So having the state really take that and lean into it, I think is helping us to think a little bit more about how maybe we can lean into that messaging to ourselves, and thinking about, we have a family business program that we operate. So how, when we go around to these family businesses and showcase what they're building, what they're making, how can we tie those taglines and those themes in? I think it really just makes a stronger communication for everyone else.
I fully agree. I mean, at the end of the day, we had not just these goals that we were trying to achieve, but real tangible challenges in the execution of this. Budget is one of them. We didn't have a ton of money to be putting the advertising out into the world. So with it's a big number. $1 million sounds like a ton of money, but for an effective advertising campaign, it's not. So we wanted to make something that people could identify with and make their own and see themselves in it and want to share. And so hearing you say that and how you guys want to use it and encourage others to use it and use it as a platform for storytelling, that just warms my heart. That's what we were trying to do and achieve.
And I think that's the magic of being in a smaller state, small but mighty, right? We have the power to be able to create things together and to amplify the messaging and be more united than I think other places in the country do. So I've been in Connecticut my entire life. So this is, to me, really special when I see the state trying to take ownership of something that's true in who we were, right? When you say manufacturing, and like this is how the state has grown and evolved over time, but who we want to become. And I think that's still carrying on that legacy, that tradition that's been here for so long. I think just really amplifies our strengths.
I couldn't agree more. You want to hear a funny story about the rebrand process?
Yeah.
So we sat down with our partners in this, Cronin. They're based out of Glastonbury. And we did a massive input session, gave them a ton of information. And they said, okay, look, you want to be marketing the state more as a person, to have qualities and characteristics that audiences can resonate with and see themselves in. So if Connecticut walked into a party, who would they be? And I said, that is one of the best questions I've ever been asked. And we all got to talking. I mean, I think everybody had a little bit of a different spin on it, but at the end of the day, we were all kind of singing the same notes, which was, it's not that person. Connecticut is not that person who walks in and the oxygen changes in the room and everybody's head turns. It's just, they're not that striking individual. But as soon as you do start talking to this person, you're just blown away. You find out more. You start peeling back layers. You say, this individual is incredibly interesting. They're smart. They're funny. They're lively and vibrant. It's just on the surface. The book doesn't tell this. The book cover doesn't tell the story properly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Personifying an organization or a space to really think like humanizing it. I love that approach to marketing. Were there any runners up to make it here? Anything that almost came across the finish line?
So there were several. I won't let the cat out of the bag because we might use the nuggets of the campaign in the future for subsequent follow-ups. But one thing I will have no problem saying is, so when we rolled this out to the governor and shared it with him, he really enjoyed the story. He loved it. His one suggestion was, because the tagline of the campaign was, what will you make next? So it wasn't an affirmative as it exists now. It was make it here. It was a question. So more of an engagement tool and ask the question to make people think about it. And he said, I like that. I like that people would get involved. However, I think we need something bold and affirmative and pushing people to believe something. And he said, so can you bring something else back? I said, okay. And so we came back with Make It Here. And he goes, great.
Awesome. Yeah. So I would love for our listeners, our entrepreneurs, business leaders that are thinking about going through a rebranding process. Do you have a piece of advice, a word of wisdom, something that you can leave with those listening?
Well, two things. And this is not just from this experience, but I've done a couple of rebrand projects in my career in brand communications. So I helped a small investment bank in New York rebrand, and then also helped a couple of event properties create their brand. And so the two pieces of advice that I have are, you want a brand to both be authentic. So, what do people say about you when you walk out of the room? But you also want it to be a little bit aspirational. So it gives you that chance to grow and evolve and that flexibility to do different projects along the way to bring it to life. The second, and I think this is far and away the best tool for anybody who's in a branding process, there are 12 brand character archetypes that exist. And I use those historically, and I use that for this one. And these are typical character archetypes that have been in storytelling since the beginning of humanity, like in cave drawings from cavemen. And it's things like the everyman, the jester, the innovator, the outlaw. So again, these probably have very evocative thoughts of what those are. And so each one of those fits a different need for your audience. So when we looked at Connecticut, who we knew we were, and our audiences we wanted to be talking to, and the needs that they had to be filled, we realized that Connecticut is the innovator, and it's in the same mold as an Apple, an HP, an Adobe, an organization like that. So that's what we leaned into and found all the characteristics and looked at other examples, and that helped us get to here. So I think that's one of the best pieces of advice I can give to any business out there who's looking at rebranding.
Yeah, I love the authenticity piece. Did you confirm those assumptions with, I'm assuming, being in marketing for so long, you went out and you did some customer discovery?
A lot. So this process actually started before I even came into the role. So I started, it was almost a year ago at this point. It was March 2023. And they had started doing some of that discovery process back in the fall of 2022. And so a lot of that discovery piece was done. And so I was able to go through the data and read the anecdotes. And a lot more of it was qualitative rather than quantitative. And one of the things I did just before I came on board was to get the quantitative piece, which we've really used to not only inform the rebrand, but a lot of our objectives over the next few years. So things like, how do people feel about Connecticut as a place to live, work, play, state pride, and their willingness to recommend the state?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I think as you're continuing to go, I'm sure you're going to keep asking those questions, have the ear to the ground, talking to organizations and getting others involved as you continue to build.
100%. And we're evolving our campaigns as we go. I mean, it was originally part of the plans, but a lot of the feedback we've received about needing to get people involved and engaged, we are including in the next steps along the way. So stay tuned. There's a lot to come out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining. But before I can let you off the hook and get on with your day, I mentioned this is our first episode, our first interview with someone. So we're going to test pilot these rapid fire questions for you. So we have 3.
Let it rip.
Okay, ready? So first one, if you could change any law, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I've never thought of that. I actually don't have an answer. Oh, here, you know what? Here's a good one. There is a bill that has gone through the General Assembly in Connecticut the last few years to make pizza the official state food of Connecticut. So I would actually highly encourage, so I'm not changing the law, but I would push that law through and make sure that that gets pushed and signed into law, because that'll actually, I think, help a lot of our marketing efforts. I mean, I don't know if anybody out there saw it, but just, I think it was a week and a half ago, it was National Pizza Day.
Mm-hmm.
And Governor Lamont,
Celebrated.
not only did he celebrate, but he declared New Haven the pizza capital of the country. So if we have a law out there that makes pizza the state food, that could help.
Can we have Connecticut Pizza Day and we'll all just take the day off and eat pizza all day long? I'll do that.
I'm down.
Okay.
I'm down. Yeah, I think there might be some financial ramifications that we need to figure out, but yeah. I like it.
Okay. Good. What's something you're not good at?
Too much. I should call my wife. Can I phone a friend? she has a long list of answers there. I think one of the things that I'm trying to get better at is when people come to me with a problem, is listening instead of giving them answers. I'm a problem solver. I pride myself in that. But sometimes people don't necessarily want answers. They just want to be heard.
Yeah.
So I need to listen more.
Okay. Better listener. All right. We'll do a little bit of outreach to your wife and we'll confirm if that's the right one. And then finally, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be first and foremost a nice person, just a good person. I think that's the most important thing to me. I want my kids to, when they think of dad, to have fond memories. And then I think professionally, I would love to be remembered for helping Connecticut tell a story that its residents were proud of, and it helped us grow the state's economy and population.
Awesome.
So
Well,
we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to have you on, and I appreciate your time today.
No, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me.
Great conversation, Jen. Special thanks to Anthony for coming into the studio and being a part of this episode.
Good idea?
Bad idea.
As we know in the world of business, there are good ideas and bad ideas. In this segment, Rory and Jen will debate the value of a specific idea. The theme for this episode was rebranding. So with that in mind, I wanted to pose a topic that is close to that theme: social media influencers. So here's the question. Should startups work with social media influencers in conjunction with their marketing efforts? What do you think? Good idea or bad idea?
Jen?
Thank you, Alex. So I think it's a good idea. I think startups and small businesses have a very limited marketing budget. So if they are able to encourage social media influencers to market and even try their brand by giving them a free sample or access to a product before it's been launched, what an easy way to get your stuff out into the world and to get some really great content.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea with one major caveat, and that is disclosure in whether or not it's been paid. I think that from a line of ethics, when we see these influencers and they are touting the use of products, I just prefer to just be upfront and say, this is a paid promotion. You get it. You still see them endorsing it. You'd still like to think it aligns with their values, but we know that they're being paid. And I actually think that it does justice for the influencer, especially for a emerging influencer, right? Let's say that you're just somebody in the local community, you have a really good following, people like your content, and you tell people, yeah, I'm being paid to use this hand cream or to utilize this particular microphone or whatever it is. It actually probably makes it a little bit more viable for somebody else to reach out to them and say, well, maybe you'd like to endorse our product as well. So for me, great idea because of all the reasons you mentioned, Jen, but just be upfront with whether or not you're being paid for it. What do you think? Are influencers a good idea or bad idea for startup businesses? Let us know. Send it a message. Or if you have a topic for good idea or bad idea, let Alex know and maybe we'll feature your idea on the show. That's our show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to share with your friends or drop us an idea for a future episode, topic, or guest.
And don't forget, we produce our show right here at the Collaboratory studio at CCEI in the heart of downtown Hartford.
Don't forget, coming up later this month in March, the Get Seated pitch competition right here at CCEI will be on March 20th, so check in and look for details on that. You can join me and all of my friends down at the Hartford St. Patrick's Day Parade on March 9th. And daylight savings time is right around the corner, folks. Sunday, March 10th. Don't forget to set your clocks back. So until next time, we wish you luck in all of your endeavors.